And I say it is the most depressing thing on this planet that the urinal I just peed into knows that I'm there and acknowledges that and knows that I left, and your stupid marketing technology doesn't.
Deanna, welcome to this episode of Marketing in the Raw. How is life in, I keep, like, it just instinctually wants to say, like, how's life in your neck of the woods? As if you live in the woods, and that's going to become kind of cliche that I'm saying it. But, like, how are you doing? Seriously.
I'm doing good. And I do technically live in the woods. My neighborhood was built on an ancient peat bog around swampland and beautiful woods. So, yeah.
Why does it sound like, with my lack of understanding of what a peat bog is, it feels like your house is going to sink at some point. You're just not going to be aware of when.
It keeps me up at night.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, literally, I think it is like an ancient sinkhole. But yeah, so my neck of the woods we're still on top of the Earth's crust, so that feels good. And yeah, I'm just doing overall good. You like how I mix that science in?
Yeah, it's like we're still on top of the Earth's crust. We have earthquakes, unpredictable earthquakes, and you have a peat bog, right?
We do.
Well,
I could talk about the Earth's crust for quite some time, if you ever want to interview me on one of your episodes.
All right. That could go in lots of different directions. So, it could just be very, philosophical, or it could be very scientific. Which direction do you go? Do you like talking about tectonic movements and shifts and plates and all that stuff?
Yeah. I like to mix the heart and science of the Earth's crust, just like we do in marketing. All right, that was a stretch, but I do really think it's interesting. And I was reading an article the other day on CNN, and they were peeling back layers of the ocean floor to see if there was life between that and the crust, and there are worms. So they should probably stop doing that, though. It's making me nervous.
Sounds like another thing that keeps you up at night, huh?
I know. Sleeping is hard.
Well, you've got a 2-year-old kid, so I'm sure that makes it even easier for you to get to bed on top of that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I'm feeling a little guilty myself. This is what's keeping me up at night. Do you want to know why?
Adam, what's going on?
Well, I have this episode to share, and I've recorded this episode. What was it? I recorded it. Oof.
Oh, gosh.
I think a couple years ago. And it's with one of my favorite folks, Chris Brogan. And, I just feel guilty because I didn't put the episode out, and we shared with a few episodes back why a lot of the podcast has not been published for some time, and that we had a pause and things. And there were a couple interviews that didn't make it out the last round, and this was one of them. So I had to own up and actually contact Chris and said, "Hey, man. That time that I asked you to come through and record a interview with me, yeah, you haven't seen anything of it for the last couple of years. Life happened, other things happened, and it didn't get published. And I'm sorry about that." And his response, I love it, and this is why he's one of my favorite folks, was, "No worries, man. I've done it. I've done the same thing. So, it's all
Chris.
good. Don't worry about that." But I'm really excited to share this conversation. And you might hear things about pandemic stuff and other things that sound like it's a little bit closer to when things happen versus all the way now, which is, tail end of 2024 when this episode is being recorded, or this intro is being recorded. But I think it's still super duper relevant.
It's good.
Can you share a little bit about what he talked about, Deanna?
Yeah. So Chris talks a lot about trust and leadership and what that means. And that's just in general. I mean, he's written a ton of amazing books. Anything you can get a hold of Chris's, just do it, consume it. It's good. It's going to be good for you. This episode is no exception.
Well, and you talk about trust in books, and this is actually my copy of his book from back in the day. And I was wondering if I could still find it, because it's from 2009, and I got my little autograph at the beginning with some comments from Chris right here. But when you talk about trust, and authenticity is a big part of Chris's who he is. And authenticity is a word that gets battered around a lot from folks who say it as kind of a buzzword, but there's very few, in my opinion, who actually truly exercise it. And I think you'll hear in this conversation that there was one instance when I bumped into Chris many years ago that completely solidified that Chris was an authentic dude that wants to connect with people and wants to teach others how to connect with people. And as you said, he's the writer of many, many, many books. He's a keynote speaker and has been a top speaker for many years in regards to social media and the internet and business in general. And I'm just super appreciative that he spent time trusting me to eventually get this episode out to you. So I hope to have him back and talk with him about some of his more recent adventures as well. But the first thing I got to do is get this one out to you. So Deanna, if you don't mind, I'll cut to the chase and share my conversation with Chris Brogan.
It's about time.
Chris Brogan, I am so happy to have you on here. So happy, in fact, that I created, one of those pandemic brain things that happen these days, which is I booked you for one time, thought it was another time in my head, sent you messages going, "Hey man, are you still joining me?" And you had the right time, but I didn't have the right time because I was so excited to see you. So I got you talking with me early. I appreciate that, sir. How are you doing?
I feel like this was the perfect time to start talking, is how I'm doing. I was ready.
Always on the positive side, always on the positive side. And speaking of somebody who always makes me feel good in ways that you may not realize, I wanted to paint a picture here because I think that for those who don't know Chris Brogan, which I think there'd be only a few folks out there because you've been doing your thing for a long, long time here, and speaking and writing lots of books, and there's some still cool stuff I think on the horizon in that regard for you as well, with another book I hear. But let me paint this picture. So when I started my business, actually, it was only a couple of days ago that it was my 14-year anniversary with my business. So I've been out there. Yeah, no kidding. Sometimes you don't imagine yourself that far along when you start a business. But I know that years and years ago, there were only a few pioneers that I would call like pioneers, people who were big, loud voices, who were all over the place talking about topics like digital marketing and social media. And you were one of those folks that was out there. And again, there was only a select few. And so, and you're also on the East Coast and I'm on the West Coast. So it was hard. I don't know how many times I actually even met you in person. It was probably a rarity at that time. But the one place that I would see you all the time was when you were hosting the Inbound Marketing Summit. You were usually there and you were emceeing the thing. And the one that we have on the West Coast was much smaller than the one on the East Coast, but it was a nice event. And it was usually in San Francisco, which is about an hour with traffic, an hour and a half away from me. And I remember walking in probably about an hour, and I think I've told you this already, but about an hour after the event started and people were sitting down and you were on the stage and you were doing what MCs do and talking and so on. And I'm trying to like be quiet and not interrupt the fact that everybody's focused on you talking. And then Chris just looks up and sees me and goes, "Hey, Adam."
Yep. Right in the middle of the conversation.
Yeah. It wasn't like you were like waiting for the next speaker to come on or anything. You literally stopped what you were doing. And I gotta say, because again, I didn't really know you. I couldn't even recall if you and I I couldn't even recall how you knew who I was, other than the fact that Chris must be paying attention to his connections online, the community that he interacts with, whatever the reason may be. It was something that had a big impact that I could see, like you were walking your talk, I believe.
Well, so I want to think about this story a slightly different way. That all that happened, it was at that whatever that place is called down on the waterfront, and
Yep.
anyway, smaller, like we do ours in Boston. Well, we did ours in Boston at the Gillette Stadium, where the Patriots play. So it's a shiny new stadium and it's beautiful and all that. And this place was this like really cool, quiet vibe. Although that was before Uber, and you could not convince a cab to come there. I remember walking quite a distance to find it. But anyway. When you walked in, I was just like, hey, and, I was so excited to see you. And I did know you. I did follow your work. And think about this though, that it's a more than 10-year-old reference, I'm pretty sure. So what did it do for you? You in your heart and in your belly and every part of you went, oh my gosh, I totally, absolutely was recognized, identified, seen. I feel valuable in that way that we're never supposed to need outside, feeling for, but you do, you go, wow, I feel seen, right? All I did was say, oh, hey, Adam, right? Like that's the lowest stakes in human interaction that could ever have happened.
Yep.
Because of name and eye and sight recognition, all the things that come with that. That's how I teach business. That's how I do marketing. That's how I do everything I've ever done professionally since anyone actually cared to hear what I had to say about anything. And it's amazing to me over and over again that people will come away with this really absolutely unearned perception of me, where they're like, he's so smart and he's interesting. He's any nice words that you'd ever want to hear about you. What they really meant was he made eye contact with me and listened to me mumble and seemed like he liked me. That's all I do. I'm not smart at all. I am nearly smart. I just hang out with people like you, and then I seem so much smarter.
Well, and I think the word that you used there, I mean, what happened was you created a connection, and there's very varied levels of being able to create a connection, but you created one in the most basic human way at that point. And there were a number of circumstances involved, just like you said, using name and eye contact. Also the fact that you stopped what you were doing at that moment, because at that moment you prioritized making that quick connection over sort of what was happening at that moment, knowing that it wasn't going to be some big hit somehow to everybody else who was sitting there for just a moment. And in fact, was probably a little bit of an example for a number of folks as well, right?
So I've made the same tired joke a million years on stage when I talk to marketing people, especially marketing technologists. And I say it is the most depressing thing on this planet that the urinal I just peed into knows that I'm there and acknowledges that and knows that I left, and your stupid marketing technology doesn't. And so in a really weird analogy, because I'm pretty sure no one usually uses urinals as an analogy to talk about connecting with people, I think that, anytime we've ever walked back in the pandemic days, whenever we'd walk into a retail store, there was only ever two types of people working in a retail store. Those people who, as you're stepping across their threshold, say, can I help you find something? I'm like, no, can you just back away? Like, let me even try once. Or they're never there. They're absolutely gone. They've moved to an entirely other company. They have a new shirt. And I feel like
New shirt.
The heart of, because they work at somewhere new, the heart of marketing, the heart of business, right? Marketing is about what? It's about building the marketplace, right? Well, so what happens in marketing, even in thousands of years old crossroads of Ethiopia kind of marketing, is, hey, you need coffee beans? I sell coffee beans. They're here. I have better coffee beans than everybody else. You, sir, come over here and take a look at my beans. That's the part we keep skipping when we market. We just walk around saying how great our beans are, and I think that it's not that hard to connect with people and make a better opportunity happen.
I completely agree. And you've been talking about sort of the shift in power from brands to what I would call connected customers for a long time. And I think back before all this stuff started happening, you were in technology yourself. And so when we talk about marketing technologists, few folks better to sort of talk about that connection than somebody who understands the technology side, and then obviously also understands what it means to connect authentically with customers. I wanted to share with you something I pay attention to also is that very same thing. I love the magic of technology. I love the efficiencies afforded with technology. I'm a big geek. Folks who know me unfortunately know that I spend too much money on new technology to try things out and kick the tires. But what matters to me most is what it empowers us to do to be more expressive and connect with customers and do those sorts of things. In the latest State of the Connected Customer survey that came out, a report that came out by Salesforce. This is something one of the reports that I pay attention to usually every year. It says that 73% of customers say that trust in companies matters even more to them than it did a year ago. And they define trust in a number of ways because this was not something that was really illustrated very much in earlier reports. So it's interesting that they're highlighting this with an entire section. It says they define the element of trust as things like honesty and authenticity and transparency and confidence, reliability, privacy, security. You've been talking about a lot of these themes for a long time. What are your thoughts on hearing this become a highlighted thing in a report by Salesforce as being important to customers in the year 2020?
So I have a friend, Jeff Pulver, who is a visionary kind of a guy, and Jeff is almost always at least 2 years early to anything he thinks is going to be important. And sometimes 5 years, sometimes 20 years early. You would think like, oh, you should get some bragging rights for that. You know what you don't get for that? Money. And what you don't get is you don't get a lot of like people don't go, oh, remember when Jeff said that 10 years ago? They just think they just invented it that week.
Yep.
I did not invent trust, as it happens. I thought I did. I went back and I checked. Wikipedia says no. Someone else earlier, I guess. But when we wrote Trust Agents, Julian Smith and I in 2009, and there is a 10th anniversary edition that just came out, wrote Trust Agents. We stole as much as we could from Charlie Green and David Maister, who wrote the book, The Trusted Advisor, which is the book on trust. We stole the trust equation out of their book. We did it again in the Impact Equation, which is the sequel to Trust Agents, because we just loved it so much. And his equation is trust equals credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by self-orientation. So you earn some credibility, you earn some reliability, you build some sense of like what we were talking about, intimacy, that connection that, Brogan knows who I am, right? Divided by self-orientation, meaning this is what's in it for me. So if I come to you and I'm talking you up and you're like, oh, I like Chris, he's so nice. And then I say, because I really want you to invest in this thing, Adam. I mean, I came to you first because I like you. You start smelling and feeling and the brakes come on and you're like, oh, I didn't want him to do that, because I just started asking you for a bag of money, which with no context. Like you didn't come to me and say, I really want to find a place to give you a bag of money, and so that's the self-orientation. That trust equation has been around for consulting teams, leadership teams and whatnot since like the 1980s, 1990s or something. It is the book that helps so many, and so many other parts of the book, is why Trusted Advisor is why so many people who work in a pure services business, where they're a consultant or that sort of a thing, or a salesperson, that's how they thrive and make their millions. What we did with Trust Agents is we just said one extra thing, which was, but you're going to have to learn how to do this online, and you're going to have to learn that it matters. So I feel like, yeah, good for you, Salesforce. But I also feel, and this is, I think you said some nice things about me, but you could take some away now. I think so many marketers pay no attention to that. I think so many advertisers pay no attention to that because there's no spreadsheet column for their trust. Did you move more units? Yes or no? Now, I always think of the lifetime of the sale, you know what I mean? The sort of lifetime customer dollars. I think that's a very important metric that a lot of companies don't care about anymore, especially if you're public, because what do you have to care about? 3 months. That's all you got to care about. Did I make the number go up in 3 months? If yes, everyone thinks it's great. But it's like losing weight. If I knew that every Friday was scale day, I could do enough things on Thursday to take 7 pounds off my body on Thursday easily. No question in my mind. And so if I lost 7 pounds every Thursday so that every Friday weigh-in was 7 pounds down, I would not lose the weight because I'd put it back on, Friday late afternoon. And I would gain more even because when you start doing those kinds of shenanigans, your body doesn't go for it. So I feel like you can make any number look good enough for your quarterly bonus or whatever, your annual bonus if you're, a slave person like some of the employees of the world. And I think that what we don't see and what doesn't show the value and what companies, when they go, where do we go wrong? The answer is always the same. Well, how'd you treat your customer? And Adam, there's no magic in that old silk hat, right? If you sell hot dogs and you're selling fewer hot dogs, well, did you buy cheaper ones? Are you not making them fresh as often? I mean, there's really no magic in this. Did you say hi to the people? Are you dressed nice enough? I mean, I guess you don't want to buy your hot dog from somebody who looks like a shambling mound, right? So did they wash their hands? There's no magic to it. But I think that when somebody like Salesforce comes up and goes, hey, wait a minute, trust is important. I feel like two things are true. I think one is, well, it's a good buzzword and you're going to add it to authenticity, which I hate that word. I almost never, ever, ever use it unless you make me. And then second, I think that no one actually, they nod like, got it, boss. And then they just go back to their desk and do the spreadsheet. That is the bitter, negative, sad part of me that says no one ever organizes their company around the idea that we'd have so much more revenue if we treated everyone amazingly.
I agree with you. It's, I don't know if I would categorize it as the hard skills, soft skills. I think just like you're saying, there's the ability to report one thing or even just tying performance to the wrong metrics. But there's that short-term view and short-term gain from a lot of those elements like you're talking about, hitting those sales quotas and this and that and the other, which honestly, and then the long-term view, which becomes harder to measure, but of the companies that have tried to make that turn and have tried to put their customers first and even their employees first, quite honestly, we find that that the more investment you put into employee engagement, the more impact that also has. Who would have thought the people that interact with your customers the most, investing into them would have a positive impact on sales and marketing and overall customer experience. But those companies are the ones that tend to thrive and also have they're going beyond competing on like price or other elements that are really hard to compete on because they've created a moat around that customer experience and that brand, the association that people have with who they are as a company and why they buy something from them for more money than they would for other people, or why they'd tell a friend wholeheartedly about something and say, go do business with these guys, or they'll come back and spend more money buying other products in the future. All those things happen not just because you've sold a widget to somebody, but it's the entire ecosystem of interactions that you have with that company and their ability, like you said, from a reliability standpoint, to deliver upon those and do so consistently and in a trustworthy way.
Trustworthy and reliability. I mean, reliability, I'd love to marry to that so much because you know who hates McDonald's? Competitors of McDonald's. You know who loves McDonald's? Everybody, whether or not they admit it. And you know why they love it? Because if you go in there and you order a double cheeseburger or whatever the thing is you need, chicken nuggets or something, you're going to get the same thing everywhere on this planet. And chefs will go, oh, that's gross. You want a unique experience every time you put something in your belly. No, sometimes I just want something in my belly. That's why I'm fat. I don't, it could be okay to eat a chicken nugget. I'm all right with it. And I always find that there's so many people that, especially on social networks, that are like, oh, McDonald's is gross. I love McDonald's for only one thing: fast, reliable, exactly what I expect it to be like food. That's it. No one sits around going, I can't wait for some more McDonald's, but you also don't feel the other way. So I think like the word integrity, I always get on this one too. Integrity doesn't mean you're some kind of saintly person. Integrity means what you say and what you do match.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you said that really nice story about how I met you, and then I see this other person and I totally ignore them and there's no reason to have, like, that's not especially good integrity, right? But I always say to people, I am the same if you say hi to me in the men's room as if you saw me on a stage, only I hope my hands are washed when you say hi to me. Only different.
Like so what responsibility do marketers or the marketing department have in building trust these days with customers?
To me, there's so many opportunities. To me, you can, first off, never ever say, here's an easy one, never say things that don't need to be said, right? Don't say shenanigans things. The other is, I think you should, if you want me to trust your organization and you're the marketing team, don't waste my time. Don't ask me which Game of Thrones character I am. I don't know any current shows. So I stumbled because I was like, what shows is anybody watching? Don't make your cool Tiger King skit. Like, it's such a waste of everybody's time, right? I think that precocious, clever marketing, funny for funny's sake marketing is almost never useful. Look, we all love it. We love when Dollar Shave Club that many years ago came out with that incredible commercial. And we hated every other one since. We see the guy on the skateboard doing the Stevie Nicks song when he has his Ocean Spray Cranberry. And we get this cool ripple through our whole soul, like, ooh, viral moment. But, you put you on a skateboard with a Yoo-hoo and no one cares and no one's going to buy a whole bunch more Yoo-hoo, right? So don't waste my time, number one. And I learned that from En Vogue. They said, don't waste your time. That's number one. Number two, see how this
I know the reference, man. I know the reference.
How this goes.
Never
Fighting
gonna
blind,
get it.
I could keep going, right?
Yeah, go for it.
You're going to get my money if you waste my time. The other is, you got to meet me, right? Like the job is, and this is Donald Miller's stuff from StoryBrand. Donald Miller said, you can't be Luke or Leia. You got to be Yoda, right? You got to be there to train the hero. And I've said since 2006, make your buyer the hero. And I think it's amazing how many people want to show me their awesome awards from something I don't even know what it means because I'm not one of them. And I'm like, that doesn't make me know that I'm going to be able to use it better. I was just saying on Twitter, here's a perfect example. Gina Bianchini runs Mighty Networks. She used to run Ning back in the day. And I was saying, look, I don't know where to go anymore. Like, I hate new Facebook. I think it sucks. So I only use it for professional purposes. I hate LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn has amazing content. I think the minute someone starts to touch the messaging function, their brain falls out. They're like, why is it going to kill you? It was terrible. I think that Twitter, I love Twitter with all my heart, and I just know it's not exactly the right tool. The algorithm just doesn't, so unlikely I'm going to see what you sent. And so that's tricky. And I was saying, so where do we go? Like, where's home for online now? Where can I go? So the only place I'm even looking at right now is Mighty Networks. And she came in, and so what does the CEO say in this moment? This is what every marketing department should say. Oh, well, I think it's pretty good, and like, that's what she said. And then I thought, but she didn't step on it. She didn't do crazy things. Her CMO didn't come and find me. They didn't go, look at all his followers. I mean, Gina knows me, so she wouldn't be that way. But, it's amazing how many marketing departments don't realize the most simplest thing in the world is when someone surfaces a need, when an event happens, I back out of my driveway, the whole tail end of my car gets ripped right off. Oh, crap, I'm looking for a new car. When I put that out to the universe, then people who sell cars should say, oh, I could talk you through some of this, or let me show you why you should buy a Mazda. I've never had a Mazda. Every single car I've ever owned is a GM, except for the first one I got from my parents. And so I'd be like, well, I'll listen, right? And I think that that's what they have to do. You have to be ready to respond, and you have to help with awareness. And I guess in the meantime, you have to just keep painting the picture of the world within which your product or service sits. So if someone is, look at how many people have a staycation because we can't go anywhere. It's a pandemic. How come more and more and more hardware places, how come more and more like home repair places, furniture places didn't say, well, we know you're stuck there. Why don't we set up a whole project with you, start to finish? Here's our YouTubes. We just did a whole YouTube on changing out your bathroom, whatever, right? Like, it just seems like endlessly ripe, fertile soil to do some work into. And I don't think I've seen anyone do it.
You were talking a bit about Donald Miller, and I know that you also, because again, you've been in the space for a long time, and you've talked about a wide swath of things that all have a connected thread. How do stories matter? You were touching upon this, but how do stories matter when it comes to building trust with customers?
What are people going to remember from this conversation, right? They're not going to remember numbers or anything like that. They're not going to remember very specific tips. They're going to say, Chris compared us to urinals, right? Like that's what they're going to remember. They're going to remember, you know what they're really going to remember? When I said hi to you in a busy room, like, which makes me sound so good. And even though, all I really do is say, oh, hi, Adam, which is like that in the movie, The Room. Oh, hi, Mark, such a throwaway line. But why do you laugh? Because you know the stupid reference, because of the stupid meme, right? People don't begin to value why animated GIFs and why memes and why even emoji, which I'm not a big fan of, but people do it. People begin not to value that, but story is the ultimate building block of memory. We can't, if you try to carry around a bunch of numbers or stats or things to remember, it's like trying to drink soup with a pencil. You'll get a little, but you're not going to, feel all that fed. And so to me, stories link everything. And it's not, someone else could be listening to this going, man, that guy talks a lot. But story is the ultimate software transference of things we need to remember and do. We all remember stories.
Even in addition to that, it was really interesting because I was reading this book a few years ago called like How to Win in Any Argument or something like that. No, that's not what it was. Maybe that's what it was. I think that's the one it was. And it was talking about, or maybe it was about negotiation or something, but it was talking about different frames that people have that work off each other when you start having conversations, when you start negotiating in different ways around things, that there are different, I think as they called it, sort of power frames that you can set up in order to maneuver the conversation that you're having with somebody. And I think it had to do with pitching, actually, something like that. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting is their reference to story had to do with, if you want to draw people in when they seem to be less engaged, that you start to tell a story. And funny enough is the way that they described it is you start to tell a story, and then when you're close to the sort of the what do you call it, the punchline, the payoff of the story, you just stop, and then you might actually do a callback later on to that. But the main point of it was that what story does is it engages the brain in a dramatically different way than everything else, and it starts to suck people in. They start to get engaged with it. Hopefully, if it's a good story, even probably mediocre stories do this as well. But right. It engages people in a way where they want to. They start to follow it, and then they want to know what happens next. They want to see where that payoff is. And so I've always found that interesting in that book, and the way that they described it, so dramatically different than any other way you may present information to somebody during like a pitch or something like that. And how it engages people in a slightly different but very useful way than all the other forms of communication.
You're totally right. And so another version of story, depending on the type of exhibition of it, I love professional comedians, because with comedy is one of the biggest tools to make your brain really expand. If the comedy's good. I mean, there's whole veins of comedy that I don't find interesting. I don't find most relationship comedy very interesting. But I can't get a date, guys. I'm not interested. Don't care. But I find, for instance, even some of the comedians that I'm sort of loath to recommend, why they work so well. So Stephen Wright, for instance, in Boston, here's an easy example. Stephen was a Boston guy. He would say things like, I spilled spot remover on my dog. Now he's gone. So the joke makes sense. I spilled spot remover, dog spot's gone. Right. He said, I had a roommate for a little while that was really into limbo, dancing in limbo. He was so good he could go under the rug. And it's just an absurdity. And you laugh about that. He said, I was, coming up the stairs, and I went to put my keys into the house, but I accidentally put my car keys in the house. So I turned them and it started up. So I drove my house around for a little while and then I parked it over on the, out on the side of the park. And I just started yelling at everybody to get off my lawn. And, the shenanigans, right? But what's great about comedy and comedians is that they teach us how to frame. They teach us how, if you package information in just the right way, you will help everybody involved in that experience. I've said for many, many, many years, give your ideas handles. So think of a suitcase, think of a briefcase, right? Give your ideas handles means let people be able to take that idea, run with it, go away. You were saying you were recounting a book you read a while back because you remembered it. Like that idea was ready-made for you to pick up and take away. If you ever read a book with a really complicated idea, even if it's a very important idea that, was any useful to anybody, I get my number one complaint. So I've written 9 books so far. And when I go to Amazon, when I hate myself and I want to look at the 1 stars, I go and I look at them and they say the same things. It's pretty common sense. And they'll say, this is like Dale Carnegie. And I'm like, yes. And they're like, I don't think there's a lot very unique here. And I'm like, definitely not, because.
You literally told me that you stole, obviously, this concept and packaged it differently.
Trusted advisors. Yeah.
Yeah.
All books are theft. All ideas are theft. And the only difference is who credits whom. And I think that Trust Agents was like Dale Carnegie. Trust Agents was saying, what you should do is probably be nice to people. I would love, thank you so much for you to compare me to Dale Carnegie. I'm into it. In fact, years later, I did a small project with their internet interpretation of his writing. And I was like, there you go. Now I'm Dale. But, it's, I keep going back to the idea that with story and in selling, we get so much closer to the thing we want to buy. And it doesn't, transactional things don't matter. Let's go back to hot dogs. Doesn't matter unless you have a story there. There's a burrito cantina kind of place in my town. I live in a very small town in Massachusetts. We should not have a burrito cantina. The guy who made it is the most Irish guy in the world. His name's not like, Paddy McGillicuddy or nothing, but he's Irish. He does not make burritos and he doesn't look like a cantina guy, but he does have a lot of tequila. I watch his Facebook lives, which are a minute or two long, live, where he'll be making some guacamole or he'll be pulling the pulled pork apart. So he's going to make these pulled pork burritos. You know what those stories do? My belly goes, go now, get that. And I buy it. So you can tell a story in something as dumb as your lunch if it works. When I see him make guac, it's weird how I really want guac and chips. And I think that it's that basic. And then all you have to do, trust and all that, you have to deliver on what you just said, so basic, but I don't think people do it is my big challenge, my big complaint.
Yeah. I think you've already touched upon this, which is, where do your best stories come from? I think there's more you can expound on that, but just to reiterate what you were just saying, I think there's so many opportunities where we overlook where a story comes from, and that we think of stories as these big epic things because commercially for many years, stories have been, big long books and series of books and TV shows and movies and all this sort of episodic content. And that stories can be pieced together from breadcrumbs of interactions and what I might call vignettes around what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Just exactly like you said, recently, I forgot what the school was. It's one of our local universities, a business entrepreneur and marketing class asked me to come and talk to the class. And nice. Somebody was talking about what to do to start selling more of these custom jackets that this woman in the class was trying to do. She obviously was not just there to learn to do business for the sake of running somebody else's business, but she was an entrepreneur herself and she was selling. And the questions almost always go to is like, what can I do that's gonna like have an impact but not cost me any money at the moment? Because as an entrepreneur, I don't have any money at the moment. And my advice was to start telling stories around your product and you're not. I asked them if she was selling her own jackets or she was selling somebody else's. And the reason I made the differentiator is it's even though it would work probably for somebody who's reselling other brands, she has an opportunity to communicate the uniqueness in who she is as a designer and maker, her product that can't be found anywhere else. What is the craftsmanship? What are all the elements of things, down to just these small little vignettes, like you said? And if she consistently does this, it's going to take a little while at first, but then that steam is going to build up, and there's no better sense of authenticity than, and I agree with you on the sort of disdain for that word. There's nothing better to sort of build up that trust and relationship with a customer than to just simply be sharing who you are, what you're about, your stories, and for them to grow to enjoy those things versus relying strictly on paid advertising to try to help you meet your numbers. There's a place in time for those sort of interactions as well. But the real long-term payoff is when you're building that relationship that feels natural in the way that it's been built. And I think what you're describing is that stories are an often underestimated tool for making that happen.
Very, very, very much so. And when you were saying that, it's very interesting. When I teach business storytelling, I say, well, it's either a story about your buyer, that's the best story. It's a story about your product in the buyer's world, that maybe is second. But then when they finally come down to, well, look, who are you? Tell me a little bit about you. The best stories are the ones that I think let people understand why you would be their kind of person. We buy from people we like. It's something I read in a magazine article in the 1990s talking about they're having a lot of trouble selling Linux at the time because Linux appeals to big furry faced, suspender wearing guys. And it wasn't the same as Windows, Oh, well, I'm a sophisticated business person. Of course I should have Windows. And Linux is like, you're a nerd. You have a neck beard, and they were talking sort of as a group in Linux Journal about, well, how do we do something about this? How do we make it so it's like, it's cool to be in Linux? And everybody wrote back, it's not cool. I thought, there you go. Well, there's your story. Hey, nerds, come join us because that's what we do. And I think that sort of story of like who you are and what you represent does become important at some point in any story. Like if especially all things equal kind of storylines. If I sell groceries, you can buy groceries anywhere. So why would you come to my store?
Yep.
Because when you come to my store, we make sure that, everything's spick and span and super clean. And you just get that feeling the whole time you're in a nice, clean place. Or we organize things for people who don't know how to cook so that you can get a sense of what you're going to need while you're here. And there's even little cards there that say, looks like you're thinking of making a meatloaf. You might not know that you need this product. It's not that hard to make a difference. And sort of like, first, best, newest, or whatever, all those things that marketers, lean on in such silly ways, they're not the thing, right? The thing is that we made you feel good. Your oh, hey, Adam story. I'll tell you my version. I went into a very small independent bookstore in Newburyport, Massachusetts. Very small, like your closet's bigger than that. And I walk in and I was like, hey, do you happen to have such and such a book? And I know that they don't have such and such a book, but you never know. So you ask, some business book. She goes, nope, but I can have it here Tuesday. Can you come by a Tuesday? And I was like, sure, I can. I lived there. I walked in the door Tuesday. Oh, and I gave her my info and all that sort of stuff. And I walk in the door Tuesday. She's like, oh, hey, Chris. And I bought every book I ever wanted from there ever bought. She beat Amazon. Because I could click a button on Amazon to have the book there, but she was there and human and personable. And I bought all my books from her. That's a story, right, Adam? Well, how hard was that? And what does it tell you? Oh, well, personable, connections probably matter. It's fascinating to me that that's so tricky for some
businesses. Yeah. So going back to what you were saying before, even with the stories as being, small stuff can even matter a bit. I kind of equated a little bit to showing the math. It's great in the end that the sort of the final solution is there for folks. But oftentimes, if you were to just sort of show the math a little bit, like they used to ask you when you're, in school, show how you got there, giving customers a peek into that has its value. want to go a little bit to you have been, and I can't recall how long it's been, if it was pre-pandemic or whatever, but you've been a big proponent of just sort of shooting video and sharing with folks that like, hey, it doesn't matter what you look like, it doesn't matter what state you're in, just start getting out there, start making connections, start sharing these things, likely very much tied to stories, and you've been a very transparent person in sharing like different states of your life and just really advocating for people to like think less about everything being perfect and just starting to get out there and start making connections. So I'm really curious your opinion on, due to the pandemic, has the facade, I might call it, of business that businesses are often trying to express in their communications and in their marketing been kind of obliterated due to the pandemic? What are your thoughts on that?
I love that question so much. On the one hand, I feel like saying just, I hope so. On the other hand, I still see people trying to act like everything's fine, like everything's fine here. We're great. And I always sort of get that feeling like it's nothing's as great as anyone wants to make it. We're all going to die or something. And not figuratively. And I feel like there's some people who have approached that by going, okay, I'm resetting how the world perceives me and I'm going to feel better about it. And I feel like other people are like, I'm going to hold on even more. And I talked to someone.
They did the same thing in a lot of other stages of business, right?
Yes.
Digital, social media. Things that now they're calling digital transformation, but they've done that in so many different ways when other things happen as well.
Adam, there's nothing more true. So here's why I hate the word authenticity. Most times the word authentic comes around is when someone says, how can you teach someone to be authentic? And I'm like, well, you can. You know what I mean? Like it's not that it's not teachable. It's a super teachable thing. But what it really is it's like therapy. What authenticity technically ultimately means is that you don't worry so bad what people think about you and you don't put up your barriers all the time. So a great example, and you were kind of edging around this one. I have clinical depression. I have severe clinical depression, but a very not so bad case of severe clinical. I always was told by my shrink, you have a very minor case of major clinical depression. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, because there's some people where that is the end of everything and they have to really kind of work through a bunch of different types of meds to get where they need to go.
Yep.
A lot of hard work. Well, mine is very treatable with chemicals, but reasonably treatable with lifestyle choices as well.
Got it.
If I don't eat stupid things, if I go to sleep better, I get slightly better. But what's absolutely true about the chemical side is I'm depressed on the happiest days of my life. This is great. I just got $20,000 today. Woo. And I'm like, that's great. Probably going to, right? Like, and that's cool, right? That's how you most always is that that didn't really help. I talk about it all the time. And the reason I do is because people don't. And as an entrepreneur, you get a lot more exposure to the opportunity for depression. So I've had this weird, perverse glee since the pandemic, like, welcome to my world, poop faces, because we're all acting in this awful way. Like we all have this PTSD, which I saw an article that said, it's fair to say that anyone who's trying to stay attentive during the pandemic, because some people have just like, we're gone, we're leaving. It's fair to say that you technically have PTSD. Now, I'm not saying that you can like blanket diagnose the planet.
Sure.
That's terrifying. So, some drug seller somewhere is like, yes, but that's not what I mean. What I mean is we're all dealing with a lot more stress, a lot more trauma than we're normally dealing with in any given day of the week, no matter which side of the political world you're in. But what I've been saying is great. So you know how you feel just like everything's in slow motion right now? Do you feel like the parking brake's on? Do you feel like you wake up from sleep and you think a nap would be awesome? That's depression. That's what I deal with. I can help all of you. So I had a conversation with a lady, and obviously we can't name a name, who was like, cry for help after cry for help on Facebook. Like, oh my gosh, my life. And I was like, let's get on the phone. Like, cause we can't comment our way through this. And I got on the phone and boom, they bawled the minute I said, hey, I'm just here. I just want to listen. Wow. This story does not end with me being a hero, in case people are already leaving the room. But I said when they were done crying and all that, I said, good. They're like, what? I said, good, because like, don't pretend that's not happening. Just pick that up. Just take it with you and be like, whoa, what a crap day I'm dealing. And then, you know, you don't have to exactly put it out there for everybody. But what you can do is say, I know I'm operating from a crap day. I'm going to do fewer of those harder conversations today. I'm going to do fewer of those I need to be peppy things today. I'm going to like file away some files, or I'm going to double check with my accountant that I did the thing I was supposed to do. I'm not going to look at that bill that I know I can't pay. You know, all these things, you can align your life around your issues and things go better. I mean, eventually we all have to do the things we have to do. I can't help anybody with that one. But I can also help you that you don't have to, you don't have to shower every single day if you don't want, especially because it's pandemic. No one's going to know. You could be smelly 2 or 3 days. You can go a week. Don't tell anybody.
I mean, I know I told you that this was a no pants interview, so I'm glad that you were aligned.
There's
right
none
there.
there, buddy. I don't need pants. You know, so Walmart of all places was reporting like a 68% increase in shirt sales. None in pants. Not even a lie. Real numbers, except that all numbers are lies. So anyway, to roll that back just to the baseline question, it's just that I feel this is the most ideal time for people to check what matters to them, to check where they want to spend their money, to check where they want to spend their time and their brain. You know, I wanted to watch this film, and it's a really important film, but I also had this feeling over and over again, like if I sit down to watch this thing, given my mental state right now, like I'm not going to get to watch it. I'm going to just weep or something. It's just not going to be okay. So I need more feel-goody things. I don't engage in Facebook nearly as much anymore because I don't care your political view. I don't care if your political view matches my political view. I'm not interested in it. I get it. I know what you're thinking. And I also know that you spending your calories telling other people what they should be thinking kind of never works. Like there's no one on whatever side of the politics you're on. There's no one on the other side going, I just wish someone would come along and write a post that I could understand. All this time, I know I've been acting like a fool. But man, someday someone's going to send me the right message and I'm going to go, you've got me now. I see the error of my ways. That's not how it works. So I have, I'll tell you secretly, because, you know, only people listening to Adam, this is a secret. It's like sushi level.
I'm putting my ear closer to my headphone.
Sushi level secret right now. I have what's it called? Is it unfollowed on Facebook? So like you're still friends, but you don't see their stuff. I've unfollowed a lot of people that I actually really like, but I don't care. Don't care about their political views. When this all washes over, whichever way it happens, I'll be willing to go and check and see if they're talking about things that I want to hear, like how their kids are doing, or their, you know, cool dog selfie or something. I don't know. I think that interaction right there, I think being strong enough to say, I don't care about your, you know, what you're doing right now, I think didn't happen before this. And I think it's going to happen more professionally, personally. And I think all life that's worth something is and will change from 7 months before this interview and hopefully another 5 or 6 months after it.
I hope it goes beyond the 5 to 6 months after it as well. I think that it's really interesting to see videos that, whether they be commercials or they be webinars or whatever it is, where you'd normally see them be this production, being in people's bedrooms, because now suddenly they've got to figure out a space in their home that they can have as an office. Or
right.
I'm trying to remember who it was recently that did like a product thing. I think it was Adobe did an Adobe Max event like last week. Did you see all of their little, they call them their not that they're sneaks or something, but it's like these amazing sort of new things that they're testing out, some that make it into their product and some that don't. And they did about 10 of these little vignette videos that were 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes long, but they were all done by engineers or somebody who worked at Adobe. And they were all obviously done on their webcams in their homes. One of the individuals was showing how AR could be used to do joint AR with another human being, where they could on their camera see the same asset you see in virtual space. And he did it with his wife. So he's got his wife, they're looking at it at their kitchen table, and you can see all the rough edges. And obviously they're doing it again with whatever technology they've got to sort of, I'm sure there's been like, there's a little bit of scripting involved and that sort of thing, but there was a very interesting human element to that. I think there was a number of other ones like the Oculus event that came out not too long ago as well. I think Apple is doing things quite differently. Obviously they're making things a full production these days, but for the most part, we're seeing this become more pervasive, and I think what you described, because you went a different direction than my initial question, which I think is an important valid distinction, which is we're all going through some stuff.
Yeah.
And so there are, exactly as you said, some hard choices that are being made of what we can handle and what we can't handle. And this is not only as professionals, this is as consumers and consumers of information online, buyers of things, the things that matter to us, like you said, are being emphasized. The real things are being emphasized. I've heard of a number of folks who they were just talking about how, like, even the folks who they were deciding they were going to let go early on in the pandemic when they had to unfortunately downsize, oftentimes the people that they were letting go were people that they were realizing weren't providing much productive value. They may have been folks that, and I'm not saying that that's obviously the case across the board, but it was one of those examples early on of people saying, I really got to look at this in a really strong way, because at the moment we need to survive, and we're not going to survive if people aren't valuing what matters at the moment versus all that other frivolous stuff. If they're not more aligned with my values and all those sorts of things, we don't need more stress, because the world naturally is in a more stressful state at this moment. And I have an episode coming out with Jeremiah Aoyang, who is a big technologist and analyst and that sort of thing. And he's been in fitness, which I know you've been in as well, and you've paid a lot of attention to that space. And he talks a lot about how the wellness technology, and I don't want to spoil too much of it, but how wellness technology and it has been showing what people value now more in regards to mindfulness and taking care of themselves and their health, and how that bleeds into brands needing to pay more attention to this pining for overall wellness and less stress and less friction in their life.
So there's a lot in what you just said, and I'll try to slice it thinner, my side of it, because I just keep blathering. So number one, my whole talk about, ourselves and our sadness and all these things and all the emotions, all that dump on that is because marketers are going, I'll just do a different color this month. I'll pick a different color. I think a color is going to be what makes it well. It's idiotic how people are trying, or they're typing these uncertain times into their email newsletter and calling it good. Okay, well, got it. I mean, they're writing like robots as if they're going to try to talk to robots, and it's just not happening. And what I'm saying is, if you realize the fact that your millions of potential customers, even if you only have 1,000 paying, your millions of potential customers aren't in the mental state to accept boring ass traditional straight marketing on the creative mindset. And they're absolutely not ready for impartial, imperfect, impersonal marketing through your automated systems. I just had a rant about this because so the new thing, it's hilarious, the timing, because you're like, do a podcast. I'm like, yes. I said yes before you finished the sentence, which is weird because it just said LinkedIn, he's typing. And I was like, yes, Adam. I get 5 to 7 podcast interview requests a day from absolute strangers. Some of which also, by the way, this is a total sidebar, say, and we won't charge you for this. And I'm like,
oh, wow.
How gracious. That's amazing. Thanks for filling my inbox. I was hoping today that I could spend money to be your guest. That's weird. And they always quote some number that's like, they think it's an awesome number. And I'm always like, oh, okay. And it's like, I can't make the joke I want to make. So there's a million podcasts out there. There's a million everythings out there. And the ones that are going to win are the ones that, connect with things that really matter to the people that care about them. That's the thing. We own the television. We own the radio. We have it all now. And so the first thing is, remember that you're marketing to people who are dealing with stress and trauma right now, more than ever before in the life history. Now, total 90-degree angle, but it means something to me. I watched a bit of that Adobe Max content. There was so much Adobe Max content. 500,000 people registered last I saw. It could have been more. 500,000 people said, yes, please market to me and give me links to all this stuff. That's an amazing number. Never heard a number like that in my life. I only watched one full segment, and I'll be really honest, it was because Awkwafina, the comedian, musician, and actor, was on it. I was like, I totally want to see what they do with Awkwafina. It was fine, and I'm not going to say anything mean about her. But in it, I met this amazing artist named Annika Jones. I made her come on my show. I was so excited. I stalked her and said, come get me, come get me. She said, okay. And I'm in love. And I'm in love with how they did it. When she ever even mentions Photoshop, your ear isn't even tuned to the fact that you're in an Adobe event. You're just like, well, duh, that's what you would use that for. Like, there's nothing in your head. And when they talk to someone like Awkwafina, you weren't thinking, I wonder how she uses Adobe. You were watching Adobe use it to illustrate her, and you were like, this is great. Like, I felt like that nerdy excitement that some people get for all marketing. I felt like this is good marketing. This is what people want. This is content that accidentally sells this product so well, and there's no accident about it, Adam. I don't feel that about the Apple event, but I do feel like the Apple event, they shifted their line just a little bit. I mean, it's taken us a while to get away from black turtlenecks, right? It is, I would never have wanted to follow Jobs. And Tim never did. Tim Cook never once tried to follow Jobs, but it took everybody a while to warm up. But now the events are different, and I'll acknowledge that. I think that if any person running a virtual event for a big company, especially a user group type, because Adobe Max is a user group kind of event, if they don't watch some of the content that you mentioned and some of the stuff that I thought was kind of cool, if they don't watch that and learn from it, they've missed every possible opportunity, like those vignettes, to show that you could totally do this in a superhuman way, still absolutely push straightforward marketing requirements on people, and still make it that someone's going to spend dollars to do it. And I think it's great.
Man, I rarely get a chance to talk to you, and I certainly don't get a chance to see you as much, at least in the last 365 days or 7 or 8 months, especially because we haven't bumped into each other at events and stuff. But I'm always reminded about why I just love what you do, and it's because I say elevating myself up to your level to some extent, but just to saying I think that there's a lot of values that I really you validate the way that I look at business and marketing in what you've done with your work, and it makes me feel really good to see somebody that I consider as I'm trying to figure out the right way, because I know you're just going to shoot me down of complimenting
Probably.
you here, Chris.
You're going to say something big about me that's not going to be true. I don't have any money. I'm poor. No, listen, you said about Ao Yang. Ao Yang is a brilliant futurist. Ao Yang is the kind of person that when he says anything, he could even be lying to us and I would believe him because he's so smart. You're like that. You're someone that if you said to me, Chris, you got to understand something. I know you're going to tell me that TikTok is stupid, but here's how it's not. I would actually listen to the next few sentences out of your mouth. I wouldn't even try to punch you. I would listen because I trust you. I have faith in you.
Well, there's a neutral area in there. You didn't have to go straight to the punch.
Right to a punch, because that's how I view people. I either really think you're super smart or I probably want to punch you if you're talking marketing. So thank you for whatever stupid compliment you were going to say that I was like smart or nice or whatever. But all I really am is just advocating for, would you please treat my mom better? Every company in the world, just treat my mom better, and we're going to have such a better world.
Yeah. And is this, I've seen, because of Calvin Lee and all his interactions with your parents all the time, right?
Look, before this, but just one quick side note, pre-COVID, people who barely knew my mom and who didn't even talk to me anymore would still call to see if they could hang out and have dinner. And half of them would be like, hey, you got a guest room? And my mom would always like, yeah, sure. Do you want us to pick you up at the airport? So she's more popular than Chris Brogan.
Well, and I think what just to sort of wrap a bow on it is with this podcast, it's the first time I've done a show that I wasn't co-hosting with somebody else. And when you're co-hosting with somebody else, there's a lot to lean on, right, as a crutch. If you're busy that day and you're not able to do all the research or whatever it is you feel you need to do to get on that podcast, you can be a good conversationalist and know your stuff and have a good conversation with somebody else. When you start to create something like this on your own, it becomes, well, what's the voice, Adam, that you want to have? And what is it really going to end up being about? And you look at the ocean of all of the podcasts that are out there and that have the word marketing in their title. And I could just be another one of those folks. And I'm not down for sort of, burning people's time or my own for the sake of just being an echo chamber of sorts. And I've been trying to find my way in that as somebody who's owned an agency for 14 years and done business and marketing for some time. My roots are not rooted in having worked at an agency some decades ago or being, going out to get a degree in marketing so long ago that my definition has been defined by who I am and how I see the world in business. And my interviews that I've tried to have on the show have been ones where I believe that there's things we certainly work on things like conversions and impressions and, what's your cost per lead and MQLs and SQLs and all that jazz. We certainly do that. We talk with our clients about that. But that's not what matters to me, and that's not my overall worldview of marketing. And in this conversation, I wanted to talk to you because I knew you would talk about real world stuff that matters to businesses and marketers, but you would also talk about those other elements that I think are super, super important that you did. You did not disappoint, Chris. I appreciate it. The check is in the mail.
Thank you.
And so one last thing, this is like the most important question before I let us sort of wrap it up and let you go. So I got to watch one of your recent episodes of the Backpack Show, and I was super excited because I didn't believe it. I thought it was just the title. And then I realized it was true. You had Sir Mix-a-Lot on an episode. And I've been a huge hip hop head for as long as anybody's known me. And when I say hip hop head, I mean like 1,000 CDs deep in my closet, not even counting my digital stuff. Yeah, I used to DJ all that. And in fact, I've got a few tracks I can send you. But most people immediately associate him with the big hit, Baby Got Back. But he's released way more music than that. And I could tell by your comments with him that you were a fan. There were some deep cuts and things you were saying to him. And also the fact that you had him on your show was, again, a little bit of a validation for an unorthodox guest to have to talk about what you do on that show. So what are some of your favorite Sir Mix-a-Lot tracks beyond Baby Got Back that we could recommend to listeners to go check out?
There's so much I want to say. So first off, I did not know that about you. I think we talked about it in passing a few different times, which is, of course, why you knew the En Vogue song so fast. And that's it's a secret of all episodes of the Backpack Show is I sneak a lyric into all of them. And I always say it in a way that makes it sound like it was like from some book or something.
People are never going to get it, right? Not at all.
Right. Not this time. And I nod my head, and they like look all sagely at me. So first off, the thing with Mix-a-Lot, before I tell you this song, Posse on Broadway. I love Posse on Broadway, which is such a dopey. It was like his first pretty good size hit, I think. And it's really just the beat, and it's kind of like I would mix that and Paul Revere by Beasties. I think that would be a fun mixing. So my friend Angel was working with him on a project, and I saw this cross Facebook. And Angel, he's an interesting cat. His Rolodex is full of weirdos like pirates and things. And he was working with Mix-a-Lot, and it was for this really dumb Netflix movie called Eurovision with Will Smith.
Okay.
Will Ferrell. And the song is called Ya Ya Ding Dong, and it is a pretend Icelandic folk song. And Mix-a-Lot heard it and thought, this is hilarious. I want to get the rights to this. I want to make a remix to this, and just to have fun. And I know that people on TikTok are going to mess with this. So he makes this thing and I watch it and I cry laughing. I'm just like, just because it's Mix-a-Lot and just because the video is kind of like him at his mixing board, because we're all in stupid quarantine, just singing along and rapping along to it. And the lines are funny and they're like sophomoric and silly like he is. And so I say to Angel, I'm like, I want to interview Mix-a-Lot. What do you think? And he's like, oh, I'll connect you. So I get the email and I connect to him and his manager. The manager doesn't write me back. Mix writes me back, but I don't recognize it at first. I couldn't remember his real name because he only thinks they're Mix-a-Lot. And so this Anthony Ray says, "Can you call me?" And I'm like, "Oh, here it goes. This is gonna suck. I'm gonna."
How much are we gonna have to pay him to be on his podcast?
I was like, all I'm thinking is I have to talk to some manager that I'm gonna hate, and this is not gonna be any good. I'm glad I said nothing because I called and say, "Hey, this is Chris." And you cannot not hear Sir Mix-a-Lot's voice. And I was like, oh my gosh, Becky. There he was. And I got to tell you this because it's so absolutely surreal. He texts me now at weird ass times of the night and goes, I have this great idea. I want to run it by you. I'm like, it's 1:51 a.m. here. Do you think I can maybe get back to you?
He's on the West Coast, man.
So I maybe got back to him. And then he goes, I can't talk to you right now. I'm at a Cheesecake Factory. I'm like, what? Like you Mix-a-Lot can't eat at a Cheesecake Factory. So he's super great. The song answer is My Posse's on Broadway. And why I brought him on the show was because he learned that as sizzly as it is to be a performer, owning the publishing rights and owning the legal library of music and including other artists that he was able to negotiate and buy after the fact, sometimes even, that's where the money is. And so we talked about how intellectual property was a valuable business product. And that's why I had him on the show. But you know why he went on the show? Because I treated him like a successful professional business person who also sang Baby Got Back.
I love it, man. I love it. And just like you said, Posse on Broadway, I got a car a couple years ago with a nice sound system. And I've got this playlist of things that I use to just, when I decide I want to hear something that's got some bump in it on the speakers. And Posse on Broadway is one of those. And that means you've been listening for some time because they've got some of those other hits that you mentioned, like Buttermilk Biscuits and Square Dance Rap, which are completely the opposite.
Those are all good tracks. They're all good cuts. He's a Seattle guy, which, there's really no one thinks, you say Seattle music, no one thinks Sir Mix-a-Lot. They of course go grunge, but I always loved that about him. I love the fact that there were maybe 3 rappers in Seattle and 2 of them were Sir Mix-a-Lot. So I'm friends with Glenn Bolton from Stetsasonic, Professor Daddio. And I'm friends with him because he's a technologist. But when I came over and started like excitedly saying his lyrics into his face, he was like, oh, back up, we're good. And I said, I'm sorry. I know we're at a tech conference, but I just want you to know that I know you. And he goes, good. And same way, 2007, I met MC Hammer at the first TechCrunch event. And I said, all my friends over there are making stupid MC Hammer jokes. And all I have is one question. Why are you here? He goes, a lot of people don't know that I had something to do with the quick play codec. And I was like, no, I really did not know that. And I said, you should fire your publicist. He goes, yeah, and I'm here because I launched this new social network for dancing. It was called Dance Jams or something like that. It was like kind of a battle of the dancers or something. And it didn't work because, a lot of things don't work. Yep. But I walked away going, wow, Hammer's smart. That's pretty interesting. I'm interested to know. And so I think that we can find awesome knowledge and insight from some really unusual places.
Agreed.
Which is probably why you had me on your awesome show.
I agree. Thanks a ton. And I would recommend that people just go back to the first 3 albums of Sir Mix-a-Lot because there's some titles of songs that I think are incredible with incredible beats that I wouldn't put on a business podcast. So go and check those out. Dude, you've got a lot going on. I'm super appreciative because I literally reached out to you a week ago, not even a week ago, and asked for you to do this. So I'm very thankful for that. Tell me, what should people be paying attention to right now? I alluded to the fact that you sound like you're about to release a 10th book and the other stuff you got going on, because you're popping up ideas all the time, and you've just got some great content you put out there for folks. Costs no money, and they can learn a lot of great stuff from somebody like you.
Well, my book will cost money. Buy the damn book. But It'll be called The Backpack. At least that's the working title right now. And it's basically how everything's all in turmoil. Now what? And that's what I think I'm writing for a book. The Backpack Show, which is a video show I launched to kind of go along with the book, which has nothing to do with the book, but might accidentally have everything to do with the book because I keep falling in love with my guests. So there's that. So the Backpack Show, really, if you just go to chrisbrogan.com and you look around for my newsletter and just get that, that's the easiest thing because you'll find out really quick if you like me, and you can hit reply because my newsletter doesn't come from do not reply at please God don't write back to me.com.
Please God, don't write back to me.
It comes from me, and you can hit reply and like, I'm there. And, I always tell people, yeah, of course I answer my own email. That's really weird. I pay people to put on my pants, not answer email. I want to communicate with people.
Well, see, we have a lot in common. There's the music. I know you're into like Batman and the comic book things, the way we look at marketing and the fact that we pay people to put our pants on. It's like, one of the...
We could do 8 of these shows back to back and still be talking about, hey, what do you think about this? Or, hey, what's the best rap about Spider-Man?
Well, that's why we aren't wearing pants today, because that person took the day off. And when you downsize, you're just going to reduce the number of days you have that person put your pants on, since there's no need to do it on Zoom calls, right?
Absolutely.
All right, man. So Chris Brogan, you've got chrisbrogan.com. You are the Chris Brogan all over the place on the internet. I really highly recommend folks that are not following Chris to be paying attention, especially on LinkedIn. At a bare minimum, follow Chris there, and before you bombard him with a bunch of requests to connect. I think just take a look at what he's got. There's a lot of value there. You're doing LinkedIn Live all the time, and I love you to death, man. I appreciate you that you made time for doing this. I just appreciate it.
Love you right back. Thank you so much for having me on. And if anyone else made it all the way to the end, you should give yourself a really good pee break. And thank you.
Exactly.